listeners, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar Podcast. I am Clayton, and the people joining me today are...
Beth, Hayley,
Jordan, hungover, Kyle.
And today we are discussing the topic of creating characters, player characters, and also NPC characters. And I believe one of us has already elected to go first.
Yeah, I was thinking about whenever we were back in college and whenever you were still then GMing a lot and you played quite a few like NPC, like female characters that were really convincing, and I always thought that would be like a lot, like an extra level of difficulty to play a gender that wasn't yours, and so I just wondered if you had any like advice for that.
Simple. I take a man and remove all reason and accountability.
Who are you quoting there?
That is from the movie As Good As It Gets.
Perfect.
Jack Nicholson.
Mm-hmm.
Like playing across your gender. I think it's very interesting, especially when you have a diverse group that you play with. I often don't play against gender because I like being super feminine all the time. But I think it's really helpful to have all these different players and like talk about them with these things, or like have someone that you base it off of. So like if I'm playing Apocalyptia and I want to play like this really powerful person, I'm probably going to model that off of like John Wayne or like really old Harrison Ford who just stopped giving a shit after a while, which I love. And just like finding like people that you resonate with and going it through their mindset. So it's not much as like, I'm playing a different gender, it's I'm still playing a character and I'm playing their story. They just have different circumstances than I normally do. And finding ways to ground that and change that from your circumstances that you normally input into a character.
A random thing that I just thought of is when I used to play a lot of World of Warcraft, I would occasionally try to play a male character, and I mean this was before voice chat, so it was just text. And people would always figure out that I was female, and they said it was because I was too helpful and generous.
I love it.
The one time I played a female character in WoW, I literally had people like shower me with gifts
They
and,
just give you
like
stuff.
offers to like help me and all this other shit, and I didn't like it.
What's not to like? Well, you brought up playing against gender. I go out of my way to not do that. I was forced into it with that game that you guys played.
Yeah.
And did not like it.
For reference, for the podcast, our RPG group got together and we did a one-shot where we each made a character for somebody else to challenge them to play against the type or challenge themselves in character creation. And then we had 3 GMs. It was me, Nina, and KP. And it was just like a really wacky one-shot where everyone was thrown into different situations. You played like someone, mind my language, super jappy, didn't you?
What? Super jappy?
Jewish American princess.
Oh, that was not what I thought you meant.
Totally different thing than
What?
Never mind. Well,
It's easy, Grandpa. The war's over.
well, the character.
I'm so sorry! Oh no! Oh my god!
The thing is, that character was like Asian.
Oh really?
On the sheet that was handed to me, ethnicity was Asian.
Sorry! Oh my god, podcast! I'm
Super jappy. Quote Hayley.
so sorry! I meant Jewish American princess and it was stuck up.
No.
Wow,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, internet. I'm sorry.
Moving on. Yeah, I try really hard to not play female characters if I can help it. Even when I'm running, I very rarely use female NPCs. Largely because I just really can't imagine what it is like to be a woman and think like a woman. I think in everything in terms of being a man, with my entire life experience to draw from being that of a man. And so, at best, I think it would be like a parody, if nothing else, you know, like a really poorly put together rendition. So, yeah, I avoid it like the plague.
I've never actually played as a player character. I've never played a female, but I have seen several other players play against their gender, or against their chosen gender, I should say. I've seen it work maybe less than half the time, where it didn't, like you said, Jordan, just devolve into a gender stereotype either one way or another, either the gender stereotype of this hyper, quote unquote, feminine woman, or the prototypical male assumption of what a female would be like if he was that female, like hypersexualized, going after anything that moves sex-wise.
Well, I think it's very interesting. Like, I feel like there's a certain level of maturity that someone needs to bring when they're playing against gender. Like, for example, I'm in a vampire campaign right now. We've been playing since the summer, and one of our players is playing against gender type. And they do an incredible job because they don't build them as like, oh, I'm playing a man now, or I'm playing a woman now. They're just playing a really cool character who likes to steal cars and go on car chases and, suck a lot of people's blood, which is really cool.
But if it doesn't come up, what's the point?
Well, I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like, you can play against gender, and it doesn't have to always be about the gender. You can also just play a really good character. And I think, honestly, gender shouldn't be as much of, like, an influence unless you're doing, like, hyper-realistic things like Apocalyptia, and there's certain situations in which that would, like, bring gender into it. But just the fact that, I'm just going to mention them, Colleen plays a male character, it's like brought up a few times, but like they're just really good at creating a character rather than I'm this guy and I need to be like this big, strong person and all of these different gender types associated with masculinity. They just play a dude who's really good at stealing cars and enjoys it. And I find having more fun with people who don't focus on like, I'm playing a man or I'm playing a woman. They focus on the story of their character. They focus on the drive of their character. And I think that's what makes a good character regardless of what gender you're playing.
Hayley, when you very first started, you hit on like so many of the different aspects that I wanted to talk about. I kind of want to break down the initial thing that you had said. And one of the things you had mentioned was drawing from movies or other characters that you have seen. That is something that I've seen work very, very well. I've done it myself, taking particularly NPCs. I draw almost exclusively from either television, movies, books. I also draw from people from my real life who I know. I kind of pull in some of their mannerisms. And I'd say one of the things that is, like as far as remaking an existing character from an existing property, it's really effective to kind of break the genre in which that character was originally a part of.
Yeah.
Say, for instance, you're making a character in a modern game, but you want to use Han Solo as an example, as your archetype for your character. Mm-hmm. Bringing that character into a different genre really opens up possibilities so that particular character you're not playing an established character who you already know all the things that they're going to do. You have a pretty good idea of who that character is, but you still have to interpret how that personality and that archetype would be portrayed in a completely different setting. So it does still allow for a lot of personal interpretation and personal growth into that character whenever you play it against in a different genre.
I 100% agree. I think it's really important to have influences to draw from, but I also think it's like a very interesting line from being inspired by Han Solo and then playing Han Solo. Those are two very different things. And I think it's really helpful for a player, specifically like a first-time player, to be like, okay, I really want to play as like a scavenger, like not scavenger. Han Solo's not scavenger. I want to play like this rough scoundrel. Thank you, a scoundrel. I want to be someone who like shoots first at the hips, ready to go, and pulling influences from different things. So like I could take a bit of Han Solo. I could take a bit of I'm really bad at movie things, so another person. But then
Indiana Jones.
Indiana. Wow, just on the Harrison Ford train. I love it. Yeah, Indiana Solo. But rather than doing everything Han Solo would do, or like even like trying to replicate it, because it's not your character then it would just be Han Solo. And I think, well, that's really interesting when you're like playing a game, like for example, Clayton ran a 80s game where we played pop culture characters from it. And we're putting those characters into that situation, but we still have enough wiggle room to add our own flavor text, to add our own like what they would do in those situations. And I think that's really interesting to not strictly bound yourself to a code of law of that character. Because RPGs, specifically with character, it's all about imagination, exploring like the limits of your character, what they will do, what they won't do. And I think having influences, specifically several, helps you build a very well-rounded character. Is there anything that you would say that people shouldn't do when they're pulling from characters, or certain characters that they shouldn't gravitate towards?
Edgelords. Really, really hate people who just decide, alright, I'm playing a D&D game. I'm going to make the edgiest, most kill everything, doesn't talk to anyone, stabs them instead, or quips one-liners asshole imaginable.
Yeah.
Like, if you've got a game where that's like, say, a one-shot where the theme of it is everyone plays, I don't know, archetypes from RPGs. Like, anybody familiar with the Magic the Gathering player types?
Yeah.
There's like Tim, I think, and all these different names, and they are all basically condensed stereotypes of different types of Magic the Gathering players. It'd be interesting to do a one-shot where you had condensed stereotypes of RPG players.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe if you were doing that, it'd be okay to make a total edgelord. But I'm trying to think back to Rathacon here in town, when I know you ran Apocalyptia, and you were running
D&D.
5th edition. Yeah, it was pretty new then.
Yeah, it had just been out 6
And
months.
I remember we had a couple of younger players with us, and they just, I think, they stuck to some of those player stereotypes, and it was interesting. It worked out. It was just a one shot, but
But it's very interesting because when new players are coming into RPGs, they have these stereotypes of these type of people, like what you're supposed to do. Plus, when you're just going in, you have like all of this unlimited creative space, and you don't know what to do with it. You just
unlimited power.
A lot of people end up gravitating towards murder hoboage. I don't think that's the correct terminology of the
No,
word.
murder hobo.
Being a
Pretty
murder
accurate.
hobo.
Being a
Yeah.
murder hobo. Slight rip into myself. I also don't know how to play other characters. I tried to expand when we were doing the Apocalyptia Factions game, and it didn't really work out for me, and I feel like playing face characters is something I feel very comfortable at, and I still have wiggle room to explore those kind of things. But I mean, that's why I play RPGs. I create characters that are like these super feminine, super like femme fatale people, because I feel like that's not who I am in real life. And RPGs for me is a fantasy. I get to explore those kind of characters, and that's why I always gravitate towards them. I like strong, powerful women.
Hayley, I'm going to disagree with you about not that last point, but a previous point that you made in that rapid fire point.
Yeah, sorry.
Brigade barrage. I think you should make whatever kind of damn character you want. I agree that you should look around and see, especially like we talked about last episode, if you're trying to fit yourself into an established group, see what they're missing in terms of utility. But I think that having the ability to, I mean, I guess I agree and disagree on some points here. Pushing yourself to try different things is awesome, and for several years, several characters, I basically just played an extension of myself. I was just KP in a setting, in a game. And, you know, that's a great way to start out, I guess. So pushing yourself is one thing, but also just being able to have your fantasy and play the kind of character you want to play is what makes these games fun. And that's what they're all about, in my opinion. And so if you have fun playing a face character, but your group already has a face character, now you got two faces. You're Janice. I don't know. I think that it's...
No, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to have fun. And if you have fun playing a face character, play your face character. But I also think that, like, when you're doing character creation and you're, like, unsure of what you want to play, I think it's really important to, like, just check in with your group, feel out the party. I think some of
Feel
the best...
up the party?
Feel up the party! Feel out the party. Because, honestly, when I create a character, I want to make sure that they jive well with the rest of the group. That's fun for me, to have a good rapport with all the other players. To have, like, banter. You don't want to play a game where people are going to hate each other the whole time. Unless it's, well, you want to make sure that these characters can exist in this world and have fun in this world, and that you can have fun exploring that with that character.
I think it would be a really good idea, though, for, like, the GM to, like, weigh in on what kind of things would be good or bad in a group. Like to kind of put your foot down if somebody's trying to do something that's really not going to fit. The example I think the first game I played in, I was probably like, like 18 or 19 years old,
Yeah.
and like I wanted to be a centaur because centaurs are awesome, and I just, stereotypical like teenager thing, I wanted to be this fantasy character I thought was the coolest. And so they cut, like, the GM at the time, it wasn't Clayton, it was another friend of ours, and like he kind of said, oh, I don't know, but then he let me go ahead and be it. But then I spent the rest of the game waiting outside of like caves and buildings and stuff like that because I literally didn't fit in the setting. I couldn't go anywhere. So, I think
Like
it
you
could
couldn't
be good.
fit through doors? Or
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't get through doors. I couldn't go. There was like a rickety staircase
really
at one
funny,
point that I
actually.
was too heavy for. So, yeah, I think you should. There are some cases where you should say, I know you want to like really play this character. Maybe I can come up with something next that you could play it in. But for this setting, it's just not going to work.
I think it's really important to like look at the world in which you're creating
Mm-hmm.
and finding ways that you can have creative fun while also staying true to the world.
Something that I've done many, many times, and it's not exactly playing myself, but it is, I take an aspect of myself and I either dial it down to 0 or I dial it to 11 and I play that character however that would turn out.
That's really smart.
That was how, when finally somebody pointed out to me that, you just play yourself in the game with a different name. That was exactly how I started to branch out and try to be different, was by, I know how to play myself. I know facets of myself. I'll focus on one of them or not at all. It was right around the time that KD joined us, I think, was when I played Jan with a speech impediment. Anyway.
Similarly to that, when I'm making a character, I like to think of more than just a motivation for a character, but an encompassing ideological system that character would be a personification of. And maybe it's a traditional philosophical ideology that, everybody's familiar with, or maybe it's got weird tweaks to it, or maybe it's a fantasy thing. But I like to use the character as a practicality test for that kind of worldview and see how it plays out, brushing up against other random characters and events and challenges. That's probably where I get the most fun out of making characters. For example, the current character is, a wizard that uses the Jedi Code. Prior to that, I played a communist guerrilla revolutionary guy. I played a raging Nietzschean Viking dude. I think it's cool to take a set of ideas and throw them at a setting in the form of a person and just see what happens. And sometimes you're a militant white supremacist that wraps his pickup truck around the tree. There's all kinds of ways it can go.
Sometimes you're the only pacifist in Sigil.
Yeah, sometimes you're teaching hobos how to make urban gardens in some weird city at the nexus of the universe.
So these are some good ideas of how to kind of get an initial concept of a character. What do you all do to kind of fill that character out? With our current Savage Worlds fantasy game, at the beginning of the campaign, I gave everyone a questionnaire of a bunch of different questions of the things that were important to your characters, what your characters would do in certain situations. What are some things that you all... That particular questionnaire is something I always fill out for every character that I make for myself. What's some things that you guys do to kind of get into that mindset of a character?
I'm a playwright out of this group. I make a living by writing. Well, I attempt to make a living out of writing. And I will sit back and I will write journal entries from their point of view, or I will write out their backstory like a play, or like a song. Sometimes I'll write my character songs because I really try and fall in love with every single one that I play. The one that we're currently playing in Savage Worlds, I specifically wrote her to be this really tragic figure who believes all of these things and is going to find out that they're all terrible and she's been wrong this whole time. And writing all of those things really got me into the mindset of things that I know as a player versus things my character knows, and having the time to sit down and set them apart was really helpful for me. So I know what I could talk about, know what I can't talk about. And I really appreciated the questionnaire. I think that's really smart. Just like going down, like, what's your character's motives? What are 3 things they like? What are 3 things they don't like? And exploring the different branches of that. It's like, if your character likes art, what kind of art? Where do they learn how to do art? Do they still do art in their downtime? Just like, even the smallest thing can really help your character grow into who they are.
Probably the question on that questionnaire that changed the way I play my characters when I came across this questionnaire. I did not create this questionnaire. I pulled all these questions from various different sources I found on the internet. But one of the questions is, under what situation would your character retire? It's giving that character an end goal that they can work toward, or it might be a goal that is just going to happen one day regardless of whether they put effort into it or not.
This was a realization I had sitting at this table right now. It's fun for me. I like to play with accents and different voices. But it actually really helps me to roleplay and characterize one of my characters. Thinking back to Jan, the character with the speech impediment, we rolled on the, what's the table called?
Flaws?
We rolled on the flaws table for one of the first times in an Apocalyptia game, and I rolled speech impediment. And I didn't want to do a lisp or a stutter or something that is kind of a more real-life speech impediment, because, I don't know, just seemed insensitive maybe. And so, so Jan had the terrible impediment where he would talk like this all the time. He just couldn't, and he had a very goofy accent, and he couldn't slip out of it. And so I had this very serious character that ended up being the party leader and had some very poignant moments, like when some bandits on the highway had waylaid us and were pointing guns at us and having us give up their stuff, and they were going to have us turn around. And in this very goofy voice, I had to say something like, no, I will look at you. You won't shoot me in the back of the head like a dog. I die like a man. But, and it was, that one maybe is a bad example, but other characters, I have, legitimately good examples of how voices and accents help me characterize them. In our current Savage Worlds game, I kind of slip in and out of this, because it's a subtle one, but the character I'm playing is this noble, has a code of honor, is, very kind of upright and rigid with a military, and he's also a prince in his background, and is just kind of very subtle. And I don't know, I can't even really do it right now, but it basically is kind of subdued and very polite, except when actually commanding people, in which case he's kind of a hard ass. People don't seem to like that too much. And then, of course, there's Jimmy Hawk,
Love Jimmy
who
Hawk.
was supposed to be just a one-off character because I didn't think I could play in a campaign. But I ended up making this, it actually ended up being one of my favorite experiences, was making a character that was only supposed to be in for one session. And so I made this ridiculous, bombastic 80s inspired Jean-Claude Van Damme figure who talked like this all the time and just rolled into town with a shotgun and a cowboy hat, I think, literally. And ended up being able to play that game, and I had to take this ridiculous character and actually bring personality to him. And I ended up becoming the town sheriff, which was weird.
And barkeep.
And barkeep at the same time, yup.
One of the major linchpins of that game.
What was the name of that bar?
The Volshatri, which, in case you're wondering, is a small trap designed to catch birds of prey.
Oh, wow.
That is an in-joke, everyone. He has to say that every time.
It's so good.
Anyway, point is, accents are a good starting place for me, in the case of Jimmy Hawk specifically, where I just knew I wanted this Solid Snake kind of 80s action hero voice, but I ended up having to craft a character around that, and it was okay because I had a good starting point, which helped me a lot. I don't know if that is something other people have experienced.
Yeah, I love taking on accents, doing weird, particularly monstrous voices. I practice at it every day, either going to or coming home from work, or sometimes both. I practice out the way that characters will talk, the actual mannerisms that they talk. And I also think about how they would respond in situations that are very likely to come up in the game. As an example, I have worked very hard on creating a good facsimile of a Warcraft orc voice that I've used many times over the years. I play orcs specifically so that I can use that accent.
Was that Marski's voice from Savage Worlds?
That's a little bit different. Each time I do it, I try to change it up just a little bit.
Because it was perfect, on point. I loved it. I want Marski to come back.
Do you find yourself over the course of the week, like, encountering things and being like, well, Seth Big Smile wouldn't be having any of that.
Yeah, he is another one who I spent a lot. He's a character who I worked really hard on the accent, and I also dialed an aspect of my personality up to 11, and that is the manipulative bastard.
Clayton, tell me, where does that sit usually? Is it like a 1? Like a 2? Like a 9?
That went from almost not even there.
I was gonna say.
All the way up. I left in my altruism as far as wanting to make sure that I'm there to help the people who are most important to me. With that duality, I was a complete bastard to everybody who wasn't in my clique.
Oh man, you almost made a TPK.
You guys at the time were the threat to the colony.
Hell yeah, we were. Watch out, Seth.
In his mind.
Clayton, I have very good memories of you doing a couple voices. One was the voice of the skull that my character took from the obelisk of skulls. I forget the details of it in the Planescape game. Was it Farscape? What are those things called? Do you remember?
Mimirs.
Mimirs. Yeah, that was one of my first really memorable voices. I remember you doing. It was really cool. Another one is Mar, the Ferengi from my Star Trek game.
Yep.
God, that was awesome.
I worked all week on that character, and I worked all week in getting and reading and rereading the Ferengi rules of acquisition. I had that character down.
I feel like for this to make good podcast material, you really have to do the voices.
Please honor us.
I don't have anything to say in those characters' voices.
You can edit it in post.
Another thing that I do for every character that I've played for the past 10 years is that character has a theme song. I find the theme song that goes with that character.
Yeah.
For instance, Seth Big Smile. His theme song was the song Curse My Name by Blind Guardian about the rise and fall of Oliver Cromwell.
I love it. Wow. Yeah, theme music is super helpful. Making playlists. For my Vampire the Masquerade game that I play outside of this group, we have an entire playlist that we'll have and we'll update it after every session. Specifically, there was a session I played Daughter of Cacophony, which is very music based. So I have this whole music library just for this game that really helps me get into character and gets me really inspired. But me and the GM had a music battle for control over Las Vegas. I know, stay with me, it's weird. But it's really helpful to have this library of references that you can pull from, and just also having something that the group can add on to. So hey, I really like Seth, and then just add hey, this song really reminds me of him, and just pulling different things. So you can I got tangent-y again, I'm sorry. I like music. The end.
We've made some very, very good music playlists for our games. Our Hunter campaign had a playlist that Clayton made.
Yeah, that one's amazing.
Our fantasy game.
It is on Spotify if anyone wants to search my name. It is there for Hunter playlist.
Brief related tangent. Sitting here hungover, it occurs to me that when I'm hungover, my voice is rough and my personality is subdued. And I have a grand history of being hungover for our Apocalyptia game on Saturdays because, it's a Friday night the night before. I have nothing better to do with my time. I'm not an adult. And I say pushing 30. And so, playing Jason Brunn, which is, maybe I failed at this. You guys let me know. I've tried to make Jason one of my least charismatic characters
You've
possible. Cool.
Yeah, I don't
Okay. Good.
I care about him, but he's a special person.
Well, ever since Jordan pointed out that I tend to play this just kind of like anything goes, positive adventurer charisma guy, I've been trying to change that, and being hungover for Jason has been very helpful.
Has there ever been like a character that you felt like you didn't enjoy playing, whether or not it was an aspect that you were trying to like challenge yourself with, or there was just something that didn't click when you were making this character, like it didn't work with the party?
I didn't actually like playing Jan that much. It was really fun, but that game was, I think, and KD would agree with me if he were here, we've talked about this, one of the most dire straits, survival is everything, apocalyptia games anyway, that we've played as a group. It was Cosmic Armageddon was the apocalypse, and there were strange, like, The Stand-esque things, Stephen King's The Stand-esque things happening, and it was dark and creepy, and meanwhile, you have a character that can't stop talking like this.
They kind of clash.
And it clashed, and like I committed to it, but at times I tried to dial it down and speak less because I didn't want to like ruin a moment with that goofy voice. But
Probably the main thing I do with characters is talking about like clashing with the setting. Because I don't have a ton, because my role-playing has been kind of split up and I don't have a ton of experience with it yet, I'm still kind of doing the playing some version of myself thing. And I try, and kind of mostly what I'm doing right now is just trying to, like, match the level of my personal filter to whatever's going on, to the type of game that it is. So, like, Anna, that I'm playing in our fantasy game, like, my filter's basically turned all the way up. But then, like, we were playing that Everyone is John the other day, and I basically was just like, oh, hell with it, and I turned my filter just all the way off and was saying things like, I'm going to use willpower in this because I really want to kill this little kid. Just like, basically whatever comes into my head, I was just going ahead and saying or doing.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, like, challenge yourself, but one of the characters I had a really hard time playing was the apocalyptic game where we did factions. I tried to push myself to do like a brute forcey character, really fighty, and go against my face ways, and it turned out terrible. To be said, I really enjoyed the character. I think I made a really interesting character, but me as a player, I had a really hard time finding an in for that, finding circumstances that I can grab with, and finding a voice for that character. And then they ended up getting eaten by cannibals, and I got really sad to the point where I actually cried over it. And then, to overcompensate, I played another terrible character named Aurora, who was literally just like Harley Quinn of the apocalypse.
the character wasn't eaten by cannibals.
She was skinned alive, and like parts of her were eaten by cannibals. They had like hunger from the trees.
You were shot in the head, and they did find you.
Oh, I thought I was eaten by cannibals.
Partially like skinned and stuff.
Yeah, I mean your body was messed with, but we heard a gunshot go off.
Okay, cool. Well, retcon. I was shot in the head by a group of biker gangs called the Bloodfucks, which were like vampire cannibals. So that. And then I was partially skinned and hung from trees. I got real sad about it.
Hayley.
Are we about to have a game confession here?
Hayley.
What?
I killed you.
You killed me! You killed me! Why did you do that? Jimmy Hawk killed me?
Jimmy Hawk
oh my god, why did you do that? I'm going to kill you!
I did it.
I rolled a kill friend out here!
Hayley, brace yourself, it gets worse.
No!
I did it for a rifle and some ammunition. How does it get worse? What do you mean?
Who hired you?
Who hired me? Oh, KD hired me. Yeah, KD hired me to kill you.
I'm gonna go to CVS today and I'm gonna murder him.
I've waited so long to tell you because you were heartbroken.
I am heartbroken.
I thought you might be over it by now.
I'm not. I really loved that character. Andy, no! I made that bitch a skateboard! apologize, podcast. I'm deeply hurt. Apparently, I can't trust any of my friends.
If it means anything to you, it happened totally by the book. I made them roll everything. You had every chance to survive given the circumstances.
I know.
But
Well, you did go outside of the settlement with a stranger,
I was
unarmed and with no one there to back you up.
That's what I'm saying.
At night.
I didn't know how to play this character. I was just like, I'm a really trusting, naive individual. I'm being honest, full confession, I'm kind of an idiot. I mean,
Brought a
you
fist to a
felt
gunfight.
me punching you, it's like a boop, like a booping you, it's not a punch. It's really hard for me to, get into that character, but I really wanted to so badly that I just messed everything up, and then my friends shot me in the head.
If it's any consolation...
Did you skin me too?
No! God, no! That had to have been some cannibals or something outside the settlement. If it's any consolation, 1, I rolled really well. And 2, you were my first PK. I had never killed a player before.
Well, that doesn't make it feel better.
Yeah, I figured it wouldn't. So basically, yeah, I rolled really well. We had a pair of snipers out there.
Everybody know? Is it just me that didn't know?
No one doesn't know. We had a pair of snipers out in the field. It was Ezra with her 50 BMG and me with a Browning A-bolt.
Why did you guys assassinate Aurora?
well, Katie thought that you were basically a threat to the town.
Really?
That you were such a loose cannon that you had to be dealt with. And so...
And Jimmy Hawk was a former one-shot looking to establish something. I didn't have a faction.
Yeah, Jimmy
like the
Hawk
rest
was
of
just a hired gun passing through.
I really didn't see this coming. This podcast, wow.
It was great, though, because it set the tone for the rest of the game to be as cloak and dagger as you could possibly hope for.
that game was so intense. I remember, we had to have, breaks where we'd, talk, outside. KD and I had, a heart-to-heart of after, my character almost murdered Nita, and I, cried a lot. And me and the Amazons exiled ourselves from the community.
Mm-hmm.
But could you have had that great journey, that exodus, without a little bit of backstabbing, treachery?
Oh, no! I mean, what a great game. But also, I'm never forgiving you or ever trusting you again, and I'm going to kill Fred Dalkier.
Wow, so you're gonna not only sever a friendship and you're gonna metagame in another game.
No,
because of something that happened
can't.
how many months ago?
10. Yeah.
10 months ago. By the way, my God, that's the longest I think I've ever kept a secret from somebody.
I'm really proud of you.
Jesus.
But I'm really, really hurt. Wow. I mean, great game, guys. Good show, but wow.
I didn't expect to bear that to you today.
That night so much. You were all
Yeah,
there.
we heard your
Sorry.
banshee wails.
Yeah.
We were in the living room and you were on the back porch and we heard just this ethereal wail and I knew that I had done something real bad.
Did you even feel a shred of guilt?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
How did Jimmy Hawk feel?
It was a job.
I was literally just trying to save people who were in the slave trade. I just cared so much about freeing those people, and you shot me. Because I cared. Monster. I voted for you for sheriff. Monster.
Well,
all of you. Except for Beth. Beth is the only exception.
I am a completely neutral party. In that whole
accurate
thing.
statement. No, it was such a good game, and I really appreciate it, because it kind of gave me an out of playing an in-between character like Aurora, who was just not very strong, but not very sane, so could get away with doing shit like that. And it was a really good game. It was a really good game that had really interesting characters with very interesting morals, apparently. But, yeah, wow. I hate you all. The end.
I think this brings up an important counter-argument to make to a few points that have been made about character creation. The obvious kind of instinctive thing to do is see what everybody else is playing and play something that jives with the group. But it seems to me like there's a pretty strong argument to make to have some points of contention so that there is drama within the group and it's not all just we're the Power Rangers and we're fighting all this adversity from outside, people have a lot more strong connection and powerful memories of things when it's them directly versus their friends in these kinds of things, you can kill one bad guy after the other, but this thing for you, this is going to be something that you're going to remember for a really long time.
Oh boy, I'm never forgetting this betrayal. One, we have it on recording now. Two, a bitch never forgets. I'm a petty.
I thought that was elephants. Never forget.
That too.
I've never heard a bitch never forget. That's a new one.
I still haven't forgiven Nina for lesbians.
Oh man, the Mars murder mystery. That
what
was
a good
fun
game.
one.
Context for the podcast. Love of my life. Left me to die on Mars when I went back to get her Polaroids because I loved her. She literally left me to die on Mars, and I was able to roll so well. I was caught up. I was hanging on the ship, and they threw me off the ship. You threw me off, hun.
We didn't have enough Delta V to carry everybody.
Yeah.
I'm
You
sorry.
guys went around and got me eventually after Clayton's character guilted you, but you were gonna leave me to die all because I love you.
There's only so much.
And you
fuel.
betrayed me in almost every game. Now I know that you knew about Apocalyptia. Then you shot me in the back for Star Wars twice. Why do I love you? No, don't touch me.
For the table, there's another player here that isn't really in this podcast, but is in our games and has been for quite some time. Their name is Nina. Hello.
Say hi, Nina.
Hi.
That's who Hayley's yelling at right now.
I'm actually yelling at the air. Nina doesn't exist because they're dead to me.
Oh, damn.
I forgot that I betray you in every game we have, and I feel very bad.
Thank you. Well, I really do enjoy Savage Worlds because we coming straight off of that Apocalyptia game where it was just backstab after backstab of everybody, and then playing a game where everyone's playing these characters who are really trying to work together. Specifically, KD, who's not currently at the table. Him and I have a history of playing characters that always hate each other. And he's playing my adoptive dad, and I really appreciate being able to play that character with the history of being a very aggressive with his characters. And I think that's a really good point to bring up. Not playing characters are always going to jive with, but if there's no even the smallest level of opposition between the groups, then what's the story for? It's just you're going to be going something, you're succeeding. I mean, you're not always going to succeed, but it's theorized that you play a game to succeed because then what's your next adventure? What are you going to do? And I think that a lot of that is on the players to bring up this level of adventure, this level of excitement, this level of doing things. And yeah, sometimes that'll lead to conflict, which gives you the story that everyone's really there to play.
D&D really tries to shoehorn you into that kind of game where everybody's playing their role, and it's one big meta character versus the world. But especially in modern games, horror games, and a lot of sci-fi, the fun of the game comes from these powerful individuals at loggerheads over this or that goal. Vampire the Masquerade, I don't see how you could run a coherent game of Vampire without having some kind of inter-party conflict constantly.
Yeah. So I think we have all given our current characters in our fantasy game where we came up with the idea or where we've gotten our the impetus for playing our characters. I don't think Hayley has said why she chose this particular mindset.
For what?
For the Savage Worlds fantasy where you're playing Desdemona.
Why am I playing Desdemona? Okay, so here's the thing. I always try to play these powerful, ideally in my mind, these powerful, strong women who they know what they want, they get it, and I really like happy endings, I think that's important. And for me, I get a lot of criticism that I'm always playing the same character, and for me, I wanted to play someone who wasn't very hard or rigid and really soft, and I was thinking about all of my favorite characters like that, and I'm really drawn to tragic figures, like all of these Ophelia from Hamlet, Shakespeare play. Just this girl who's really just trying her best and it's not good enough and she ends up killing herself, which is really interesting. And I feel like I'm not a very soft person by any means. And I try to put myself what are my circumstances in which I would just be that optimistic, be that open-hearted and kindness. And I really wanted to explore that. And I think I need to get better as a player, with accepting certain situations, like the loss of Helena. I lost my shit Like, I lost my freaking shit, guys.
You wonder why I waited 10 months to tell you.
Yeah, I'm a bit overdramatic, to say the least.
Really?
Yeah, just a little bit. It's not a big deal, really. But I wanted to play this tragic character, because I think it would help me deal with, putting myself in bad situations. But also, I really like stories. I'm a playwright, and I was really intrigued by this tragedy that, like, backstory-wise, I, like, started to, like, put together. And I wanted to play this character for a really long time, actually, like, a really long time. But I just never could find a way, and I also felt like I wasn't mature enough to play her. So I feel like I'm at this place right now where I can deal with having a character that I most likely know isn't going to get a happy ending. And I'm really excited to explore those kind of stories, because I'm so used to games and, like, everybody wins and we saved the day and we achieved our goals and everything's good. And I love telling those stories. But I often find the best stories to be things where you get shot in the head by your friends, and you get exiled from your community, or the love of your life shoots you in the back twice. Those are the fun stories to tell. And I love to talk about Desdemona. I think she's a cool character. And, I just think, for me, I like playing faces, but I push myself in exploring the lengths I'm willing to go for a story. Story, for me, is the most important thing when it comes to making a character. And I think she has a pretty cool story to tell.
Jordan, how about you for Talon? What made you make the decision, I'm going to essentially play a Jedi who, before the game even started, you had been elected leader? Mm-hmm. What made you decide, I'm going to be this Jedi who is going to bring together this band of people, have the same code for this entire mercenary company? What was your thinking?
It's been a long time since I played a really good character. Like an actual, like, maybe not lawful good, but like strict good, not trying to do anything very shady kind of character that has a real moral code. And I just want to see if it would work. I mean, part of the whole election to leadership process was like pitching an idea as to what the team was going to be. And so I just thought of, some fairly generic, Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy, run around the world collecting the items kind of quest. And the more it got developed, the more interesting I tried to make it. With the last game, having run the last game where everybody was at each other's throats and everyone was essentially running their own sub-party, very rarely was anyone ever working together. We decided to do this election for leadership because we wanted to see a game going all in one direction. And, so with consent of everyone, that's what we were up to.
This is rolling right off of our backstabby apocalyptic game, in case that wasn't
I
clear.
think that's what our friend group needed, to be honest with you. Like, we had a lot of fun being terrible to each other, but it was starting to leak into our actual real lives, and I think that's something we should always be careful of when your characters blend into your reality.
Yep.
And we really needed that for our party, and I really appreciate what the Savage Worlds game has done.
Which, I gotta point out, is a unique experience for me. Mm-hmm. I've never had a D&D, or rather an RPG group, that has their character interactions blend into real life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's cool, but it also, I think, means that you do need to be a little more mindful of what your character does, which, to be completely frank, is a little bit limiting. When Alkir goes on, like, Zephyr naval leader mode and becomes kind of a hard ass, I've actually seen a couple of my friends look as if they've actually been hurt by a strict or stern remark in real life, and I'm just like, whoa, no, like, that was just a character. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's why I was afraid, because Clayton was like, before I started playing, because this is the first game that I played with this group, and Clayton was saying, kind of encouraging me to kind of go outside of my type, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, the thing is, the reason that I'm so worried about playing an asshole, especially your very first character, people are going to be like, alright, is the character an asshole, or is she an asshole? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I'm just not feeling that.
After that Apocalyptia game, having run it, I kind of felt like I had done that to everybody in the group, especially since the game ended so badly. Like,
the game
really,
ended great. What
well,
are you talking about?
nobody got a happy ending, really.
Well, no.
The city was in flames, and like nothing really worked out the way anyone wanted exactly.
My bar blew up.
Several times.
People lost limbs, lost loved ones. It was horrible. And so, one of the things I wanted to do with this whole thing with the current fantasy game was basically just have like a redemption, amending, like all good feelings now. Let's work as a team kind of thing on my part. So that's what I was trying to do with making basically Obi-Wan Kenobi as a wizard general guy, is like, all right guys, let's have faith in goodness again. Let's go do that.
I think it's really working. I think it's really helped us as players for our really tight-knit group. But I also think it tells a really good story, specifically coming off the coattails of something that's almost completely opposite. And I think that's really been helpful. And I really appreciate your characters and the worlds that you create.
Before I forget, during the big revelation there, when you asked,
what do you guys do if you get into playing a character a few sessions into a game and you realize you've got a character that you don't like and can't see anything to do with it? What then? Is it just eat a bullet or do something stupid and, death by town guard? What?
I don't know. I think it's really important to talk to your GM, specifically if it's going to affect your story. Like, I think I remember it was, like, later in the game, and I was actually having some problems with Helena because I couldn't, like, get into her. I had, like, brought out, I was like, hey, I'm not having as much fun. So
that's the reason why I thought it would be okay to kill you.
No,
you didn't like that character, and I was like, Hayley doesn't like them anyway. I'll end their suffering.
I loved this character. I couldn't give her what she needed. I thought she was a really cool character. I created a really cool backstory for her. I loved this, like, really powerful Amazonian queen. I just couldn't do her justice. And I was trying so hard every week. It was taking a lot out of me, but, like, everything I did was wrong. And I think it's really important to have communication with your group and with your GM. Be like, hey, I'm not having as much fun, so you can work something out. Maybe they drop off at a port, or they do end up dying in some way. But I don't think that it should be like you throwing yourself onto like some spears just to get out of the character, because then it could like ruin the story making for the entire group. So I think communication's really important when you're like not having as much fun. But that being said, don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm not having fun. It's okay to abandon a character. It's okay to play something different. But I think to do that, there must be some level of communication with the group.
Absolutely talk with the game master.
Yeah.
Because then they can work it into the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think character deaths, especially when they're like story elevated, they're really nicely earned and done, and you could have all of the story making rather than, they died because they fell into a pit.
I mean, imagine if the actor playing Tasha Yar had just quit the show. They would come up with some bullshit reason, but instead we got a really awesome character death in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Good shit.
Wait.
You're a nerd.
Haley, if you had it to do over again and could go back and have that conversation with me when I was running that game, what would that be like? What?
I think it would have been like, hey, I really enjoyed this character made, but I don't think I'm doing them justice. Is there a way where I can like work like there's a power shift within the Amazons, or is there something that we could work out where I'm not mainly focusing on Helena? Because I really enjoyed that character in that world, but I just couldn't play her.
Oh, so you mean just write in a canon way to get the character out, not like some storyline shuffling or something?
No. Yeah, I didn't want to affect the story in any way, unless that's like something that you wanted to like do. Like, I have this cool idea if you don't want to play this character anymore. Right. Of course, I'd run with that, but like ideally, if y'all hadn't murdered her, I would have really appreciated just having her exist in this world, because I think she's a cool character, and ideally one day I'd like to get to be like a well-rounded player enough where I could I play that character. I mean, not that exact character because she's dead. But
I remember specifically we dumped her in the bushes.
You dumped?
Yeah, that's
you're just making this worse.
We also killed the Soyuz, which was a faction that KD ran. We also killed the Soyuz member who led you out there because there couldn't be any witnesses.
Yeah.
So you weren't alone when you were dumped in the bushes.
That doesn't make me feel better.
I'm really sorry that cannibals came along and desecrated your corpse, though. I feel bad about that.
So I am learning new things about this situation because I wasn't privy to all of this. So KD sent a character of his out to die specifically to get her. Wow.
Well,
that is much darker than I.
It wasn't initially going to be we kill this person. Do you remember exactly more about it?
He was a fairly new recruit, and yeah, he was like totally green.
Oh my god! It's a good thing I did not in character. I did not learn that because I totally would have ended the Soyuz. They would have been the first to go. They at the top of the hit list instead of Jimmy Hawk.
It was cold, man.
Man!
It was his first Soyuz character. I can't remember the mother. It was that one that set this all up.
Yeah,
I don't think the son that he played later knew anything about this.
Right.
See, I think that's really interesting because that second character also hated my guts. It was great. Just like intense hatred for the Amazons, which I understand that I don't know. I was really excited to play this in the circumstances, and I think all of the level of extra all the characters were, which is really taxing on my playing experience personally, that is. And if I would have had to do that again, I wish there was better communication with that group. Because I think, it's really important to talk to the GM and talk to the other players. But it also makes a really good story. We get to look back now and laugh. I'm using air quotes because I'm still angry!
So, since we've discovered that as an RPG group, we're not good at playing games where there is a lot of sandbox competitiveness, kind of anything goes, what could be some ways that we could maybe overcome that, I'm going to call it a weakness, and try to, ease into being, capable of playing competitive games like that?
I think that might be a topic for another session.
Okay,
podcast.
I didn't answer it.
Yeah, I have strong feelings about that, but I agree.
I disagree with the premise of your question.
Really?
I don't think that
let's
we
not
as a group
let's
are
not
bad
talk too much about it.
I'm not going to get too much into it, but just to say, I think that having experienced it going forward, we'll probably be a lot more prepared to deal with.
Oh
that
no!
kind of
I mean,
thing in the
if we were about to do that now, I feel like we definitely learned a lot from that experience. But yeah, okay. Anyway,
I know I
that's
told
on
Jordan this before, but I'm just going to say it to have it in the record. That type of campaign can only be run once. It can only work that way the first time.
Mm-hmm. But I also think it's really interesting because we played that game as players where we're okay, we already know these people, we're playing with them, and especially if you're going to do a backstabby sort of game, you should play with people that you feel very comfortable with. Because that could really ruin a friend group. It almost did with us, and we were very well knit. We're very close.
I wouldn't say that it almost ruined our... We'll talk more about this later.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I felt like it was straining on us.
For creating characters, I think we've kind of skirted around one very big point that is very important, is to know what game you are going to be playing.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Because I have made characters before, and I thought I knew what kind of game I was going into, and then I get there, the game is, the GM pulls a switcheroo, and suddenly I am playing in a completely different game. My character has no relevant skills, and I'm just sitting there twiddling my thumbs the whole game.
Yeah.
That's what I do a lot with Clayton. After I make a character, I'll be like, could you look over this and just make sure I'm going to be useful? Just make sure I'm not going to be this totally useless piece of crap.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Also, just checking in with the world. Be okay, this is the character I have. I've noticed that they're not very useful. What can I do? What are my options? And it's really important to build the world. For the Apocalyptia game that we're playing for this podcast, I was really nervous about I had this character I wanted to play a mom in the apocalypse, and everybody was part of this robotics company. I was really nervous that I wouldn't have anything to contribute because I'd be an outside source. And Clayton and I had talked about it, and you were able to work it in, and I think overall it went really well. I normally play useless characters, and Wendy's not entirely useless, which is kind of great. But just having that open communication and just checking in is really important. But also I think I don't know necessarily be involved in world building, but when the game is being pitched, don't be afraid to ask questions. Be okay, here are some ideas. Would this fit in this world? Tell me more about the world. What's the lore like? Is there things I should be reading to get inspired for the campaign? I just think it's I think basically what a lot of us are saying throughout this whole thing is that communication is key, regardless of your role in the game as player or as game master, it's really important to communicate with the people that you're playing with.
That definitely holds true in RPGs. In real life, in terms of friendships and relationships and interpersonal relations in general, you don't need to communicate.
Yeah.
There's
never talk to your friends.
Use them for all
Ever.
they're worth and throw them aside.
Dump them in the bushes.
Flaws, I think, are an interesting thing to get into as well in character building. We touched on it a little bit, but with D&D being the benchmark for role playing games, that strongly discourages any kind of flaws. It's a min-maxy kind of game. But if you've got something that is a serious challenge to you in some way, if it's a personality thing, if it's a physical thing, whatever it might be, it automatically gives you a reason to be hanging out with other people who can help you with that. And so flaws are a great catalyst for creating relationships with other people, or can be. But anything that you can come up with to at least link you to one other person in the group, that is a pretty good tool to have a good time. What sucks is having a character that is self-sufficient, and as soon as something comes up where you want to go left and everybody else wants to go right, why would you bother going right? It goes overboard. You don't want to have the first time I ever tried using relationships in a role-playing game, I remember everybody rolled relationships between their characters, and a bunch of people kept getting relations and some kind of romantic relationships. So it became this really weird, incestuous, impossible circle of people that was very tangled. But if you can at least have one or two pre-existing connections to people, then everybody else becomes part of your character too, or those people do anyway.
One of the things I really love about the Apocalyptia engine, which my knowledge has not been used often in the games I play, but I wish I kind of really enjoy it, so I want to bring it back, is that relationship chart, because it really helps ground your characters. I remember the first time we played it, we randomly rolled, and there was frenemies and allies, and someone was a cousin of someone, and it just really cemented okay, these are people that have already been lived in. They're real. I know who they are. They know who they are to each other. And I wish other games incorporated that, or at least if it's something just sitting down okay, how do you all know each other? Just having a session to play, just sit down, the downtime sessions of a game to really know your characters. I think that's might be something to look into doing before the game even starts. Have your pub session. Have a session where you just figure out how the characters met. How do they know each other? How long have they known each other? It helps.
Pug session?
A pub. Yes,
pub
that
session.
too. A pub session. Like Red Dragon Inn. It's a board game. It's a drinking board game that's not actually a drinking board game, but totally is. It's about the downtime for a D&D group. Instead of all the adventures, it's their time in the inn, drinking and gambling away their money. And I think it's really important to play out those things, or at least talk about them, so that way you can figure out how your characters know each other and why they stick around each other in the first place. It's something that really helps me, because I fall in love with everybody else's characters, I want to play with them. They're cool.
Clayton, we gotta get back to a tavern in our fantasy Savage Worlds game, because I have a cassette tape of Armenian folk songs that I've been meaning to play.
I don't think we've been in a tavern once.
One
No.
time early.
Yeah.
We went to Marsky's Tavern also in Human Land.
Well, everybody was in the town in, what's the name of that little town? Southbrook?
Yeah, Southbrook.
Sounds right.
It was Southbrook. We haven't gone to Bogview.
Yes, you've been to Bogview, just not the tavern.
I've gone to
Bogview is where the Order of the Sentinel
And then
is.
there was another one down by the mountains that's not listed. It's the port town where we had to split off into non-humans and humans with air quotes, because I think we only have one human in our group.
Well, right, but I
Great.
don't think the whole party went to a tavern together in that town, though.
Let's
only
fix
done
that.
it once.
Last Night on Earth bar at Elven Isles. We're currently in a genocidial war. Last night tavern party. Let's do it.
It's not a word, and it's not.
It's
that
not a
kind of
word?
war.
What?
Genocidal.
Genocidal?
Yeah. Also, we are not committing genocide.
We're not, but
Stop saying that.
the Vikings are committing genocide, and we have to stop them. And there's a lot of them that we kill, and at least that's how my character's hearing it, because she doesn't understand. It's fine.
All right, we're reeling it back in.
Yeah. Okay. Rewind.
Any other points to make about things?
Yes, make a character that you can grow into over time. I've made the mistake of making a character that was pretty much everything I wanted it to be from day one, and everything after that was just a +1 or +2 to what was already there, and that got boring. That got really boring. So make something that has some goals and some, milestones along the way.
And a lot of that has to do with the system. Dungeons and Dragons, it's built in that you're going to grow. Your numbers are going to grow. It's assumed that you're going to get more power and that you're going to develop as a character. You're not supposed to create a character who is fully self-actualized. A game like Fate, you are supposed to make a character from the onset who is fully self-actualized. That character is who you want them to be at the onset, and it's your choice whether or not you have a growth of the character.
Traveler's another one like that.
Yes.
You're pretty much
really
at
wanna
your
play Traveler.
peak, and you're not going to progress very quickly.
Yes.
Do an entire session about Traveler.
Well, we will be recording many.
Well, since we're on the character creation session, for those of you who may not be familiar, Clayton, do you want to briefly talk about why Traveler character creation is just the shit?
Traveler character creation is one of my favorites. Traveler is the first science fiction role-playing game. It came out just a couple years after Dungeons and Dragons, and even from the very beginning it had an extensive character creation system where your character starts at a young age. Current Traveler starts at 18. I don't know how first Traveler started out, but in Current Traveler, your character starts at age 18. You make a roll to go into a career that you want to try to go into. If you succeed, then you're able to go into that career, and you have adventures essentially for a 4-year span. You make a couple additional rolls to determine what happens to you during that 4-year span. And then for the next 4-year span, it continues in a cycle. And it goes until the player is happy with their character, or until the character dies, whichever comes first. It is by far the most intensive and extensive character creation that I've seen in a role-playing game, and I've seen quite a few. Other games that have very extensive character creations, I know that the Star Trek usually has something very similar. The Fate system has where each player goes around and links your characters together by, for instance, saying that you've been together in a previous adventure. That influences the character's aspects during play. To me, those are you don't actually have to have a character in mind whenever you sit down to have character creation session. Most other games, I try to have a character kind of in the back of my head, or at least several characters, depending on what the campaign is going towards. I try to have a good idea of what's going on, but with those game systems, you can just show up and just go from start to finish, have a character made for you in a very short amount of time, and have pretty much the entirety of your backstory written for you as well.
In Chaosium, in Stormbringer, they have something kind of like that, and I can't remember if Call of Cthulhu does this or not, but in Stormbringer, you would roll everything randomly like you did with old D&D, but not just your stats. You'd also roll for your class or your profession, and they made no pretense whatsoever of classes being equal across the board. You could wind up being a powerful wizard, which you could only do if you rolled that randomly, and those were extremely powerful. The best all-around character, I think, was called a captain, and that guy was just loaded to the gills with stuff. Or you could wind up literally being a beggar with horrible disfigurements, missing limbs, having very little skills and no money. I mean, the entire span of human experience was there, and you had no idea going into it where you were going to be from, what you were going to be capable of. Like, forget having a character idea. It just kind of handed you a situation, and you had to play through it. It was rough, or awesome.
I want to play one of those games sometime. I want to run one of those games. It might be 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. It might be something else, but I want it to be a straight down the line roll for everything. kind of the way that Traveler does it, but Traveler kind of guide your out of control missile of your life path. But I want to run a game, but I have to have buy-in from the players that you guys are going to have to be happy with playing a character who, like, going straight down the line, you roll 3d6, this is your strength, 3d6, this is your dex, 3d6, this is your con. You might not even qualify for any of the classes that you really want to play. Another instance in which the players have to, the game master has a lot, the trust of the players in order to be able to pull off. And the players themselves have to be comfortable enough with playing a character who is not optimized, who has very huge, major deficiencies in their abilities. I've encountered a lot of players over my years. I've probably played with a total at least 50 players over the years, come and gone, and very few of them would even entertain being that brutal in character creation.
I think I could do that. I think it'd be fun. Knowing that, knowing ahead that I was going into something like that would be critical for sure. I didn't understand with Traveler just how difficult it was until my character finally got into the profession that I really desperately wanted, to be a scout, to be a galaxy explorer. And then on my very next 4-year roll, I have a catastrophe happen where I lose my ship in disgrace and get ousted and become a beggar. So...
Well, what do you say we quit this bullshit and roll some dice?
Yeet.
Let's do that.
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.